Good morning, YouTubers and modelers. Old Man Tech here. If you watched my last video, you may have noticed that I made an attempt at making my weathered model, my first model ever, and I think it turned out okay. And I guess I've been bitten by the gosh darn modeling bug. Well, anyway, this build is a 1968 Chevelle SS. In my videos, I'm not going to do any parts reviews. However, I will highlight any build issues I come across, the method I used to overcome them, progress pictures, and the finished product. I actually had this car back in 1974. It was blue with a 427 engine from a Corvette and El Camino springs all the way around for lift. I never had any pictures of the car while I owned it, so I will rely on my fading memory. Let's see how it turns out. Now, the first thing I noticed when I unboxed it, on the body, you could hardly tell there was any door there other than a small silhouette. I relied on some video that I watched from a Mr. C. Check out Mr. C's videos. This dude's got it together. As he did, as I started out with an X-Acto blade, a new one, and you go around it, the silhouette, just very slowly, and just kept etching out a little bit more and more until you get it down there a little ways. And as I took another blade that I had in my X-Acto arsenal, and it had a cutting edge on the front of it, and I cut that off, ground it off actually, to where what remained was the thicker part of the blade body itself. And then I followed that around and around and around until I got what you see right now. My gosh, it took me about 2 hours to do both sides. It's deep enough now. I think when I paint it, it's going to have more of a realistic look than if I'd have just painted it the way it was. My next step was to raise the back end of the car to get that sporty look. I'll show you how to do that next. I did replace the wheels with some nice wheels that I got from Hobbytown. Although these wheels that came with the kit look fine, I couldn't bear the thought of having a skinny tire on the back. So there you go. You can see the back end of it. Should be able to see that rear end hanging down there. Nothing like a good rear end hanging down. Alright, let's move on to the next step. This is a good example of, like I said in my last video, it's a good idea to figure out what you want to do for a suspension and get that all laid out and do all your work on that before putting the rest of the model together. Okay, in order to get these rear end lifted up, I bought some tubing, styrene tubing, and I got a little bit of some rod, styrene rod. I just picked out a couple slices that I thought would work pretty good for this. And what I did was I took the piece of tubing and I put that underneath what the spring, where the spring would have been bottoming out. I put about 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch and glued that onto the spring to lift that up. And it turned out the shocks came out okay. I didn't have to do anything with those. And then there's this section here that goes up to the front of the frame here, and of course it was short, so I took some of my rod and shaved it off on both sides so it was kind of flat looking, and glued it in here and got that onto the frame here. And these traction bars, so there wasn't so much of an angle on them because I lifted up the rear end. I put some of that rod in here and filled that in, so they're not going vertically or anything too much on you. So that's how I did the back end. What I will say is good about this kit is the front suspension here was pretty much all put together, except for putting the little springs in there. The push rods and everything were already on there and attached, so your guy didn't have to fool around with piece by piece in it on there. Then I used some of the stock wire I had in my shop and sized and fitted the wheels. Had to grind down the axles on the wheels a little bit, depending, to get everything to come out so it looked nice. So that's how I jacked her up. Now we have most of the pieces painted. To simplify what I used, I'll show you the paint that I used and where. The Tamiya NATO Black I basically used on the bottom of the chassis. I used it on the deck behind the back seat to kind of give a little contrast between the other black. What I like about this kit from Revell is the detail. You've got a shroud, steering section here. You've got the blower motor for the heater, the coil starter, and a wiper motor. A lot of little details in this kit, which I kind of enjoy. Now in the other colors, the darker and the shinier color, I used an opaque airbrush colors, just a deep black it's called, and I used it on the frame to give a little contrast between the frame and the chassis. And I pretty much use it on all these other parts here. I used it on the dash. The dash is pretty much done except for putting the decals into the gauge areas. And the door panels, I used some chrome paint to highlight those. And that's where we're at so far on the painting scheme. Along with the body, as you can see, I used a pearl blue. It's got little pearls in it. Really sharp looking color. Different ways it hits the light. So that's where I'm at now. I did want to point something out about this chrome paint that I used on the door panels and other areas. I used this, I don't know, it's got a big W on it, I don't know what it is. It says it's liquid chrome. Now the color, I mean the chrome is wonderful, but I did find out that when you've used it on something you've already painted or something, it'll almost like not want to flow very well, and you end up pumping it and pumping it and pumping it, and eventually you get chrome running all over the place. So I thought, well, that's a hard thing to work with. And I even got different sizes. I got the big ones and I got the small ones. So what I ultimately did is I just shake it up real good, take a pair of pliers and pull that tip out, and then just dump some of that paint right here, the chrome paint, and then take a real small needle paintbrush, and that's where I got into these little areas with here. I have better luck using this paintbrush and the raw paint than I use the tips on these darn things, but maybe that's just my opinion. However, I've had pretty good luck with these Sharpies. This metallic silver. Probably not as chromy as chrome, but for whatever reason, I've had no problems with this going over something I've already painted and it flowing. So, Sharpie, good job. Alright, at this point I've got the interior put together. Got it detailed out. I've got the decals into the gauges. You probably can't see it under this light here. And got that all put together. Firewalls put on. Power booster. Windshield wiper motor. I really like the decals they send, particularly for this battery. It's got the Delco decal. A little bit of aluminum paint on there for the lead, and the red on the battery caps. Got that all done, and we've got the body pretty well trimmed out with the chrome trim and such. I did use the 102 liquid chrome pen with the bigger tip. It flows pretty good. It keeps on working for me. And if I need to do some touch-up, I'll just take the cap off and stick the micro brush in there and get a little bit of that chrome on there. and then I can get into the places that the tip of the pen didn't get into. So pretty much got the body done and ready to go. There'll be a few more things I'll be putting on it. I don't know if I'm going to put some decals on it or not. It's kind of what my car looked like right here, and I don't know if I want to clutter it up too much. But anyway, there's that. And got my engine started put together. In this case, I did elect to get the pre-made distributor with the wires already in it. I figured that'd be easier to work with this than the last model. If you may have seen how I did that engine and the wire that I used, boy, that was a pain in the butt. So hopefully this will go a little bit easier and she'll look all nice when I get her all detailed out. So that's where I'm at this stage of the game. All right, I'm going to show you how to put the spark plug boots in, at least how I'm doing it. There's several ways you can do this. I got this distributor kit with the boot material. So and the way I'm doing it, I'm just going to start by putting the boots on, and we'll run the wires to the boots. So I'm going to cut the piece. Got a length of wire here. I'm just going to stick it in there a little bit so I can still bend it. Then we'll take my X-Acto knife, a new one. We're going to cut a 45 notch out of it. Then we're going to stick this other end in on the other side. I don't know if the camera's getting all this because I got my magnifying glasses on because this is so small. There we go. Alright, once you got that notch cut out, I'm going to take a little super glue. I'm going to put that right in where we took that notch out. I'm going to bend the wire to get her 45 approximately. I'm going to wipe off the excessive glue that's oozing out. Then I'm going to take some of this Instaset. We're just going to put a little drop in there. I'm going to wipe off the excess again. Then we're going to pull this out. There's our boot. Da, 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 da. Here it is. All right. Now we've got that made. There's excess wire on this distributor. And I'm just going to take a little bit off of that because I got plenty to go to my coil. And this stuff is so small, it's real easy to drop and lose it. Well, apparently I lost that one, so we're going to cut another one. Hang on to it a little bit better this time. I'm going to grab that. I'm going to put a little crazy glue on the end of it. We're going to stick that in one end of our boot. Boy, this is small stuff to work with. Lost her again. See how small stuff is. Now I know from the holes I drilled into the heads that there's a limit to what I can use for wires, so I'm going to cut it back. We're going to stick a little hot glue on the end of that. We're going to stick this into the head. We'll put it at the position we want it. We'll turn it a little bit. And the good thing about the little wire end is in there, we can always bend that little wire a little bit. And we're going to take the next wire, we're going to bring it around and just see how long we need that to be. And we're going to cut her back where we think we need it. We're going to take a little super glue again, stick that in there. We're going to hold it and she falls out. Story of my life. So we've got this side of the engine done. That's how I'm doing my spark plug wiring anyway, so hope that helps somebody. Okay, at this stage we've pretty much got the interior on the chassis all put together, other than the wheels. I've got the brake lines ran to the rear along the side here, and they come up into the master cylinder. I've got the fuel coming from the flex hose from the tank down the right side up to the back of the engine and into the carburetor. I've got the battery cables, the red and the black. Got the coil and the spark plug and wires and the boots all in. And no, Merle, the firing order is not correct. I think it'll run anyway. Alright, here's the upper view of her. Got her all done. Gonna have to get me one of them automatic turntables like some of you big boys got, so my fat finger ain't in the way, but give you a good view of it. I'll put the hood back on here. And there she is in its glory. Pretty much looks like the car that I had. Wheels are a little bit different, but other than that, that's pretty much the stance and the way she looked. Okay, here's the lower view of it. We'll bring it around. See that nice rear end hanging down there? Oh yeah. Alright, after I got her all put together, I noticed something that I've missed, which can happen a lot of times after you get her all done. Give you a few seconds to pause the video if you'd like to. See if you can take a guess of what's wrong with it. Tell me what's missing on this car. We'll put her right there. Time's up. Alright. If you look real close, those of you with an eagle eye, you will notice that I have no brakes. Of course, I use these off-the-shelf other wheels. I like the wheels. They look real nice. But it's missing the brakes. So, live and learn. I think what I'm going to do next time is get a very thin sheet of styrene, cut it to look like a rotor, maybe even paint a red calipers on there. I can't do her now because of the length of my axles, the wires that I used. I would need just a little bit longer wire to do that. So I think that would have made it look a lot sharper to actually have some brakes in there. So that's something to consider, as I say, when you're doing your suspension and you're getting your wheels on there. Have this stuff all planned out ahead of time. Now, I will say this. If you were driving this car, I would allow yourself plenty of time to slow down.